Okay, the leftist toolbox, which is painted pink, has in it tools that really come from your toolbox, which is a camo color. Right? You have a camo color toolbox, and from your toolbox has gone out the three tools: wrench, hammer, and screwdriver. Sanctuary City, rainbow colors, and social justice, all taken over by our progressive friends whose sole method of operation is politics. That is to say, they have only politics as their means of getting things done. They don't see much use in the private sector, and they are skeptical of private solutions because they're always afraid of inurement, the whole idea that a private party might get rich. Well, under their system, which we have today, inurement is a grave problem, and corporations and investors and shareholders and lenders of all kinds, people who have built fortunes on speculation, they are the ones who are making a killing in the government capitalist economy that we have today. So the left hasn't escaped its great worry about the great ones, right? The mighty ones, the trusts that need to be busted once again, as they were in the era of the robber barons. We have today what the left effectively created, along with your socialists who identify as conservative. That most conservatives are in fact socialists, and there are very few conservatives who are free market. And that's what I make that distinction. I'm a classical liberal, a Christian deacon, right? A person who's a kind of libertarian-oriented believer in the Lord Jesus, a Christian libertarian-oriented, which means that I can't be a conservative, and I really can't be a Republican, mostly, or vote that way if I vote at all. And of course, the left can't be that either. It's party headed by a very noted female, the wife of a former federal president. They don't have much to offer either, and yet they've claimed in their pink toolbox tools that belong to the marketplace. And I'd like to suggest tools that really belong to Christendom. They belong to the idea of the Christian civilization, the Christian nation, right? The Christian people, the race of God's people, right? In the old days, they were the Israelites, but today, God's people identified as the church, right? The elect. Those are people that are spread everywhere, in every country, in every tongue, in every race, in every congregation of the church, no doubt. There are these people that are the church. You might say the church invisible, as opposed to the church visible. And their interest is in social justice, even though the left has put it from the camo toolbox into the pink toolbox. They really don't deserve to have that. And the rainbow colors that propose the pride of homosexuality, the great blessings of being like unto those in Gomorrah and in Sodom, where the Sodomites tried to rape angels who came to visit Lot. Remember the passage from your Sunday school days back when you used to go to church? Well, that was one reason that city was destroyed by an overburden of slag and flame, and went up in smoke. The smoke rising from the horizon in the fields and in the plains. We're told. The idea of Sanctuary City is another toolbox in the pink, a tool in the pink toolbox. It really doesn't belong there. And the left, I'd say, is using the concept very clumsily, and it does so under the fantasy that if we get immigrants into the country illegally, they'll all be Democrats. Well, that's ridiculous, and I think it's ridiculous because people who come here from Catholic Hispanic countries are very conservative. They're very suspicious of the state often, and they're tend to be very pro-family. They believe in hard work. They have virtues that Americans have in many ways lost. Caucasian and Black Americans have lost many virtues that Hispanics bring with them by custom, right? By habit. Hard work, not humiliated by any line of work. They'll work pulling your strawberries hours on the day. And if Pedro can't make it, he makes sure his nephew, who's got another job in a garage, on his day off, comes to back him. Okay. His nephew will be there in the field because someone has to pick those strawberries for the owner, and Pedro's not going to let the owner down. So that's the kind of relationship you have, especially among the very best of Hispanic immigrants from one of the countries. You'll have to find out which one. They are the very absolute best people to have working for you. And we want them here in Chattanooga. We need to have a stronger local economy. And the left has taken the idea of the sanctuary city and made much of it. Much of it's just PR, but there are about 300 American jurisdictions, cities, and counties in some states that have written sanctuary policies or practice sanctuary policies. So in other words, there's de facto and de jure. Some do it by ordinance or law, de jure, and then some just by practice, and that's de facto. Sanctuary cities, and the focus and the locus of this movement, if you will, is in favor of immigrants. And what happens is the police departments are not allowed to ask for questions. If ICE is going to conduct a cold claw raid of a very warm chicken plant some afternoon, the local cops may tip off the owner, or may tip off a network clinch pin in the Hispanic world and say, hey, there's going to be some. Make sure everybody reports sick today. That's the kind of thing that happens in sanctuary cities. And the idea, of course, is very libertarian. That we locally, we're going to make a decision about what we want in our city, and we're not letting Nashville tell us what to do, and we're not going to let Washington tell us what to do either. Well, you, my listener, may disagree. Maybe you think Washington should tell us what to do. And why don't you tell me that? Why don't you let me know that that's the case? Let me know what I'm overlooking here, if you would. Yeah, go ahead. You can call me 800-8949, 800-8949. Maybe we do want Washington to control this. Maybe we do want Nashville to control this area of the marketplace, the labor market. We don't want to have people who are different from us around us, and so we want to oppress them. We want to make it difficult for them. And so sanctuary cities are simply odious. And the right, the conservatives, the Republicans are seemingly unified on this point. And they will lecture me about how immigrants are bad, about how people who speak Spanish are bad, and how we need to obey the rule of law. But what the right, who are against the idea of sanctuary cities, forget is that the rule of law has been multiply violated by the very parties they want to empower to control this innocent and harmless human activity of movement of family from point A under an oppression to point B, across perhaps a border. Where there is maybe a little bit more liberty, maybe a bit more prosperity, maybe letters come from that far place that are very favorable. Houses are cheap. Look, we can get loans here. We can start a business. We can run a taco cart, no problems. And your uncle has already 2 taco carts, and he's making he's covering his rent and paying for his 6th child to be born in a hospital. And that man there who's writing the letter across the border to Mexico, he's a man we should look at not with dread and not with fear. And we shouldn't think about getting the National Guard out to stop that man at the border. That's not what we should be thinking, especially if we have a lococentric perspective, which I think is worth considering. Okay, I think it's worth considering lococentrically. In other words, that Chattanooga is the center of the universe, as we say here at 92.7 FM, 92.7 FM. David Toulis, your host here on the David Toulis Show. Chattanooga, Hamilton County, and the Chattanooga MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area, I will grant that the center of the universe. And so what is good for Chattanooga, we want to allow to happen. If it's good to have people here, if it's good to have new blood here, hardworking people to come here with families who believe in children, right? Who believe in babies, who want to have babies, right? Who make love a lot and have babies. Let them come. Why do we want to oppress them? Do we want to invite them? Do we want to shun them? And what do we want to do? What do we want our representatives to do? What do we want the mayor to do? The city council? What about the county mayor? What about the governor? What should the governor do? Well, I'd say, if anything, officials who have control of police should be encouraged to do as little as possible, to stay out of the way. Let the market develop. Let the free market in labor occur. Let there transpire the movement of people into Chattanooga. What can we do to invite people here? What can we do to advertise in Mexico City, perhaps, or in a foreign capital that Chattanooga welcomes you? We would like you to come to Chattanooga, cross the border and come here. We are pro capital. We are pro labor. Many people here speak Spanish. Many people here speak other languages. I was talking with Andy Patel yesterday at Northgate Liquors. He doesn't know all the Patels, and yet there are many Patels. And the Patel family from India are a noted contribution to local economy. That family, in one branch or the other, owns much of the hotel business here. Many gas stations, many convenience stores owned by one Patel or some other strand of the Patel family. And that is something we should consider not with dread, but with admiration. We should say, well, they made it. They made it in America. They're enjoying the freedoms that we have. And now I say that not double-tonguedly, because we do have many freedoms that they may not have had there. Private corruption is endemic in India, Andy admitted, and that here it's much less. But Andy, he loves India. He's always an Indian, he says. But he loves this country too, and in the liquor business. He is a man who studied to be an engineer in India, reared in India, Andy Patel at Northgate Liquor. And he's in the liquor business. I said, well, doesn't your experience show that the university is kind of a racket? And he admitted as much. He's always liked being in business. And so he wants to maybe earn more. If he's in business now as a clerk and manager in a liquor store, he can at some point own liquor stores, right? Own businesses. And when he has grandchildren, perhaps he can rest a bit and relax and look across his domains, his dominions that he has created by his hard work and hiring the right people, right? Hiring the right Indians, hiring the right Americans, white and black, and hiring the right Hispanic immigrants, all to work for him. And he is living out the ideal of America. He's living out the ideal of Chattanooga, of Hamilton County. And don't forget, people who are Yankees who came here in warfare against the South, they ended up loving Chattanooga. Colonel Wilder, for example, investing in Chattanooga, buying land, starting businesses, marrying into local families, having their sons marry into local families. All strangers and enemies and aliens too, right? They came here by war. The Indians have come here by immigration, and so have also Mexicans, Hispanics, of all kinds come here to Chattanooga. Now, I'm working on a particular sanctuary city concept, and I think about it a lot, so maybe I mention it more than I should. And that is that sanctuary city needs to be established in Chattanooga against a particular title, not of the U.S. Code, but of the Tennessee Code annotated, that being Title 55. And the number, by the way, is 800-8949, 800-8949. And I want to bring this up here because it's in the news. Two stories in the TV press yesterday about enforcement of Title 55. We can see it all around us. It is something we touch every day in some form or other. And I want to just clue you into some of the vocabulary involved. And the story is about the Distracted Driving Awareness Program. Soddy Daisy Police Department is taking part in it. Of course, the Tennessee Highway Patrol is the sponsor of that event. There's free state money for municipal governments that take part. Thumbs down to texting and driving campaign. And there's a lady who works is a dispatcher, according to TV3's story. Her name is Allie Roach. She says, texting and driving, I thought, well, that's not really that bad. I can get away with it. It's just one simple look at a text, and I'm good. Well, she was 16, the story says, and got into an accident texting while driving. I completely ruined my car, she told Casey Freeman of TV3. I crashed right into the truck, and it was all over one simple text. She's now involved in the program. The DHS reports that in 2017, there were 24,000 crashes in the state, and 120 of them were fatal. Our mission is to drive to zero. We want zero fatalities in the state of Tennessee. That's Pam Weathers, the Soddy Daisy PIO. And there's also a story that is worth looking at on TV9 by Brandon Evans. Brandon Evans with a nice photograph from his television station massed troops, if you will, standing around, I think Tracy Trott, can't quite tell, at a podium talking about the need for safe driving. Well, driving is something that is under regulation, and it is in transportation. Now, the problem, and you say, well, all right, so what does this have to do with sanctuary cities? Well, let me get to it. The idea of sanctuary cities is that the transportation title is widely abused, and it's being used outside the scope of the authority of the law. In other words, the enforcement of Title 55 across the state for decades has been ultra vires, that is to say, outside the scope, beyond what is allowed. And what I've done is, in my reporting as journalist here, the journalist that no one can quite figure out here in Chattanooga, is to do a long bit of interviewing and reviewing of Tennessee law and reading dozens and dozens of court cases. For example, let me just read just a couple quotes. All right? Just bear with me. These are Tennessee cases. The right of the citizen to travel upon the highway and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business differs radically and obviously from that of one who makes a highway his place of business and uses it for private gain in the running of a stagecoach or omnibus. The former is the usual and ordinary right of the citizen, a common right to all, while the latter is special, unusual, and extraordinary. That's Ex parte Dickey. I'm not sure if that's the Tennessee case, but there is one that's just like it, Hoover Motor Express in 167 Tennessee 628. It is well established, it says here in another, this is also a federal case, that the highways of the state are public property, that their primary and preferred use is for private purposes, and that their use for purposes of gain is special and extraordinary, which generally, at least, the legislature may prohibit or condition as it sees fit. And we're talking here about the private use of the road. Now, that means to say it's outside of regulation, it's outside the scope of the distracted driving statute. All right, let's put it that way. Just put it plainly. If you're traveling, you're not subject to that statute because that statute applies to drivers. And drivers are people who are using the road for profit. You hear that? It is the free person who uses the road for travel. Here's a State versus Harris of 1934, and that case says that the business of using the public highways for profit earned by transporting persons and property for hire has been definitely excluded, get that, from the category of private or personal rights. That the primary use of the state highways is the use for private purposes, at 1934. So this is, of course, prior to the driver's license statute being passed. But the statute that was passed in 1939 or 38 did not destroy any right. It didn't eliminate any right. It didn't reduce anybody's rights. All it did was simply create a licensing program and regulation for drivers and operators who are the profit-seeking users of the road, right? Who have an extraordinary use of the road. And that does not affect people like you, my listener, probably, if you're not a shipper or a cab operator, who are just using the road for your private pleasure. And my analysis in my report to Neil Pinkston, to Sheriff Jim Hammond, to City Council, and also to the City of Dunlap, as my first foray into the nether regions, points out that the law is clear. Now, the problem is this, that the High Court pretends that there is no distinction. The High Court pretends that there is no subcategory of travel, which is transportation, a category which is smaller than the overall category of transportation. Travel. Travel is the main category of movement on the road by car, truck, or bike. Transportation is the subcategory of the for-profit use. In other words, the business use of carrying goods or people for hire. The problem is this, that we need to have the creation effectively of a sanctuary county or sanctuary city, at least, that lets people use the public road for private purposes without worry about their status as licensees. You're a licensee if you're involved in transportation. And the problem that I'm hoping the officials will solve is that the poor, the ignorant, the minority, the alien and stranger, and very often, widows, and sometimes maybe even orphans, those protected classes in the scriptures, are harassed and hounded and jailed and fined and penalized and impoverished by this system of rapacious ultra vires, outside the view, rapacious law enforcement. It is an oppression of the poor, people who can't afford insurance. They're careful as can be on the road. Poor people don't want to have an accident either. And yet they're oppressed, driving without a license. Well, maybe the man I mentioned, whose name is Rudy Soto Rodriguez, maybe Rudy Soto Rodriguez of 7602 Lee Crest Lane in Hickson was simply traveling. It's an oppression to put him in jail if he wasn't involved in transportation. That is unjust. And for that, we need a sanctuary city. David Toulis.
3, 2, 1. Chatham